carnivorous plant lovers. Happy World Carnivorous Plant Day. My name is Jeff Kung, and I'm going to be showing you how I grow Cephalotus follicularis, or the Australian pitcher plant. I'll go over a little bit about how I water them, what their schedule is for feeding. I'll go over lighting, as well as how I heat them. And then I'll go over a little bit about how I take care of pests. Anything from aphids to powdery mildew and spider mites even. Let's get to it. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a little bit about my background in growing carnivorous plants. I've been growing about a couple of years now, and it all started in the pandemic when I stumbled upon a video from California Carnivores about Venus flytraps. And I wanted to get back into plants, but I remembered when I was a kid, I loved Venus flytraps, but I couldn't keep them alive. Well, now I'm an adult, I can learn about it. And their videos really showed me how easy it was really to grow carnivorous plants. So I have a bunch of different types. I've got these two IKEA cabinets where I grow different types of Drosera, Nepenthes, and some more Drosera in here, and I have my pings. And then we'll go outside and I'll show you my temperate stuff. And so here we're in the kind of the tail end of winter, and my plants are still pretty dormant, but I've got a bunch of Sarracenia and a whole bunch of cultivars of Venus flytraps. Most of these came from California Carnivores. They've been my inspiration, and yeah, I've just been enjoying these guys for the last couple of years out here. So let's get back to Cephalotus. So the heating that I do for the plants, I use a heating mat. You see I have a piece of board underneath here to protect the desk. But I've got this seedling heating mat over here, and it's got its own little temperature regulation on there, and I got it at a setting of 3 out of 5. And that tends to keep the temperature around the mid 70s during the day. On hot days, you can get up to like the upper 80s inside of here, which isn't too bad. But for most days, it stays around the mid 70s. And at night, it dips down to around, about the mid 60s to low 60s. And that seems to do them just fine. And they seem to do well in that temperature range. As far as humidity goes, I don't do anything special with the humidity. I leave it basically as is with the ambient room humidity that I have in my house, in my living room. I've seen the humidity drop down as low as 30% and go as high as 65, almost 70%, depending on the weather outside. So I don't really do too much in terms of like increasing the humidity for these guys. They've adapted, and they seem to be doing pretty well with that. So my watering routine came about from really a lot of experimentation. The plants that I have will start to wilt a little bit if I don't give them enough water. Their lids will actually close. And so what I do is once I see their lids close, then if I give them water, the lids will open up again. And that's given me kind of an idea about how often I need to water them. And based on my conditions here, the humidity and how fast the pots dry, I found that watering them 3 times a week does the trick. And the way I water these guys is I water them from the bottom. I for these small 2-inch pots, I have these 2-inch trays, and I fill those up about halfway. And so that's all the water I put in there. And by the next day, or even by the end of the day, sometimes that water will get all drawn up. It depends on how dry the pot is. But that's all the water I give it. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays is my schedule. And I let them go dry for 2 days over the weekend. And then I start all over again on Monday. And that seems to keep them pretty happy. Their lids don't droop. But I can tell they're very thirsty after just a day of drying out, because this water often will just disappear by the end of the day, and certainly by the next morning. If for some reason it's extra humid and they're retaining more water in the pots, the next day I'll have like maybe a small amount of water. I'll usually dump that out, and I usually dump it in here in my little terrarium over here. So excess water the next day, I will just dump out. And that's been doing pretty well for all of them. All of these guys came as little tiny 1 or 2 pitcher plants, tiny baby pitchers, like these little baby pitchers down in here. But they have all done very, very well under my conditions here. So feeding, I usually feed these guys about every 2 weeks or so. And I use a liquid fertilizer, a 1/4 strength Maxi fertilizer that I mix up in a gallon jug. And the way I give them the fertilizer is through a syringe. This one holds about, I think, 12 milliliters. And what I do is I just squirt it a little bit into each pitcher. Let's see if I can get it to happen here. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I just do a little squirt. And I don't do every pitcher. I do like, maybe 2, 3, 4 pitchers. For the big one, I'll probably do like 5 or 6 pitchers, maybe 8, depending on how generous I feel in the moment. But that seems to do them just fine. They are exploding under my care. So it's been pretty fun watching them grow and feeding them. Occasionally I'll throw live crickets in there for them, but they're kind of a pain to use. So I just stick with the liquid fertilizer. You can also use Osmocote, but I tend to be kind of careful with those. They can melt some pitchers, especially if you put them into a pitcher that's just recently opened up. I would wait until a pitcher's matured quite a bit and hardened off after a week or 2, and then use an Osmocote. Certainly on larger mature plants like this guy here, you could definitely put an Osmocote in a few pitchers. I've done that a few times, but it's just more convenient with the syringe and the fertilizer. As far as lighting goes, I use a Yescom 225, a single panel. And the unfortunate thing is Yescom has decided to discontinue this panel lighting, which is unfortunate because they were pretty cheap. They were about $25, $30 a panel. And they last quite a while, and they're very, very bright and of the right spectrum. As you can tell, the Cephalotus that I have are pretty dark. The light is about, 8 to 10 inches above the plants. And as you can see, they darken it really nicely under these lights. So I'm not sure what lights I'm gonna go with after this. I'm gonna have to do some research on that on my own. But these lights are on about 14 hours a day. They turn on around 6 o'clock in the morning, and they turn off at 8 p.m. So 14 hours seems to do them just fine. Now, as for pests, oh boy. I've had a couple of issues with aphids. They are so sneaky because, as you can tell, these plants clump together very tightly, and they're super hard to find, these aphids. They tend to kind of congregate around the middle. if there's any normal photosynthetic non-carnivorous leaves, they're pretty easily spottable on those. You can spot those clinging onto flat leaves. But otherwise, they can get really down deep in there and cause all kinds of havoc. They will kill your plants. So the sooner that you spot them and treat them, the better it'll be. What I tend to do is I take a lot of photographs of my plants, do a lot of macro photography. I get up really nice and close, and that helps me catch these guys very, very early. As for powdery mildew, that's also pretty nasty to get. You'll get pictures with this fuzzy white stuff on it. Powdery mildew tends to get into the tissues and spread throughout. And I think you can spread them with water. So if you get if you water overhead, you can spread powdery mildew that way through the water droplets. I do not water overhead. I watered, like I said before, just with the tray method, and let the water soak up for a day or so. So I don't worry too much about spray that way. But again, because of my photography, I can spot them, the powdery mildew, pretty early. And once you do that, I use a sulfur-based spray to treat the powdery mildew. And one treatment usually gets rid of it and clears it up pretty quickly. Literally the next day, it's gone. So that seems to work pretty well for me. When it comes to spider mites, they're actually not too bad to spot because they create a lot of webs. You'll see a network of webbing around an infestation area. Be careful not to have too much wind blowing around. They do get carried off by a breeze, like from a fan, and they use their webbing to kind of move from plant to plant, from space to space. I mean, you need some circulation around your plants. I don't particularly have that much circulation around here. It's just in my living room. So I think it gets plenty of air. They don't seem to be needing extra air movement. But if you do see spider mites and you see the webbing, be sure to turn your fan down or turn it off, treat it, and then make sure that the spider mites are gone, and then they should be okay. Because the spider mites will fly away on their webbing and catch a ride on the breeze and move from place to place, plant to plant, and that's how they spread. And if you can see closely here, let me zoom in a little bit. This picture had spider mites on it. You can see the damage there. You can see the remnants of the spider webs around there, as opposed to a healthy peristome like this. It's nice and shiny and glistening. So spider mites can do quite a bit of damage, and they're horrible. So the way I treat spider mites is I use a pretty strong pesticide, as a specific miticide that will get rid of these things almost in an instant. The next day, they're usually gone. But if I see spider mites, I will follow up a week later with another spraying, just to make sure anything that survives the first spraying doesn't come back to haunt me again. So the three types of pests that I've come across are the spider mites, aphids, and powdery mildew. Those three I've dealt with at least 2 or 3 times each, and they'll come back again. I'm sure I'm going to see it again, and I just keep a supply of antifungal sulfur spray and miticides and insecticides to take care of all of that. So this is my UC Davis clone. I got this a couple years ago from a grower in North Carolina. His name is Andrew Suey, and he owns Backyard Carnivores. And he was selling a small pot of this guy. And here it is. And now this is what this looks like today. And this is Daniela. This is a cultivar from California Carnivores. It's named after Daniela Rebeck, who does all of their social media posts in Instagram and TikTok and such. But this is such a beautiful, beautiful cultivar. And this is a typical Cephalotus follicularis from California Carnivores. And this is the kind of plant that you would probably find in Southwest Australia, where they come from. And it's just as beautiful as any other cultivar. This one in particular has some beautiful greens and reds. And this cute little cultivar is also from California Carnivores, Toby. And they named this after their nursery cat, Toby, who unfortunately passed away about a year ago. But this is such a beautiful plant with beautiful red coloring all around. And it's just a lovely plant. And this is Cephalotus follicularis, Deflora giant. And this one also came from California Carnivores. And this has been such a prolific pitcher. It's got tons and tons of pitchers, lots of young pitchers that are still on there, and lots of new pitchers coming up. This is very, very full, and it's just an amazing plant.
It's not a surprise that gardeners, educators, and scientists are fascinated by these unique plants. The International Carnivorous Plant Society, or ICPS, not only love these plants, but welcomes growers just getting started all the way through professional scientists. The ICPS even started an annual World Carnivorous Plant Day to celebrate them. The free online event is held the first Wednesday of May. Take a look around our website and you'll find historic documents about carnivorous plants, growing guides, free educational resources, and more. Have questions? Ask. We don't bite, but our plants do.